Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel. Today, we're going to take a look at an app for your iPhone that's been long in the making. It's been years in development, and that's right, it is Photoshop on phone. I'm going to say phone because even though it's on iPhone as of today of this recording, it is in the works to get the Android version out as well. So let's talk about Photoshop on the iPhone. Whether you're a existing Photoshop user, someone who dabbles in Photoshop, someone who's never used Photoshop. We're going to talk about the benefits of using Photoshop on your phone, what you get today in today's version, and maybe some things that are coming, but some of the cool things that you'll be able to do in the palm of your hand with the power of Photoshop. So let's get a couple things out of the way. First of all, it is a free download. So you can go download. And a lot of the things I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be grabbing some stock images right inside the app that are free. So you can go ahead and search for those same images and play along with me. After you get the app installed, you can come back and rewatch this and do some of the same things I showed you. Now, also with that said, it's a free download, but it's very powerful. So it can have up to, for example, 8,000 layers. It can open existing Photoshop files with all the things that you've done in Photoshop on your desktop. It saves automatically to Photoshop Cloud. So therefore, when you go to your Photoshop on your desktop or Photoshop on your iPad or Photoshop on the web even, you can open and access those same documents. So whether you start on your phone or whether you start on another surface, you'll be able to work with the same documents back and forth. So really cool, great features that you can take advantage of. And with that said, let's just go ahead and dive in. Now I'm going to do 10 things that beginners want to know how to do. First thing we're going to start off with, obviously, is the interface, because you kind of need a quick tour of what the interface is like, because it's unlike any other version of Photoshop you've ever used. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so I've got Photoshop launched, and this is kind of the same kind of home screen you'll get once you install the app and sign in with your Adobe ID, even if it's a free Adobe ID. So at the very top, I see the Photoshop icon, I see the cloud icon, letting me know I'm connected to the internet. You can use this offline. So I do want to also point out there is some learn content right at the top, some suggested videos for you to get started. So if you wanted to meet Photoshop, kind of what you're doing today, learn how to work with layers, learn how to add something new, so make selections, so forth and so on, those videos are right at the top. Or you can close that and you'll still be able to get to them from the Learn tab down at the bottom. All right, so the second section is a section in the middle. Let's get started. And it's the most common areas, and this is going to be our number one, by the way, once we get past the interface, how to open and get started with new documents. So whether you're opening a photo from your phone, whether you're creating a new blank canvas, you just want to start with a blank page, you're using Gen AI, Generative Fill, to create an image from scratch, or you're starting with Adobe Stock. And we're going to be doing a lot of that so you get to access the same free Adobe Stock images that I'm using. And then underneath that are the files that you have already been working on and saved, no matter where you did them. So whether it was like the first image there is Photoshop on desktop, the second one is Photoshop on my phone. It doesn't matter where the image started, I have access to it on any Photoshop surface. Then you see the big blue plus sign, that big blue plus sign, or that plus sign in the lower right-hand corner, allows you to access the same things we saw in the middle. So create a new canvas, add from photos, add from stock, or generate a new image. And I always want to point out, because I don't know what size phone you're going to be working on. So if you're on a 16 Pro or smaller size like I am, then you're going to say, oh, there's only 4 things. But if you're on a 16 Pro Max or a bigger phone, let's just put it that way, then you're probably going to see a 5th item or a 6th item, depending on the resolution. So I just want to point out that just never forget that you might be able to have more options just by scrolling. It may not be obvious right off the bat. All right, so I can do those first 4 things, or I can take a photo. So this will bring up the camera app right inside my Photoshop app. So take a picture and it will open it right in Photoshop as I take it. Of course, as a photographer, most of my photos are in Lightroom, so it's great to be able to pull them from Lightroom. I'm going to show you a Lightroom workflow as number 9 in this series. And of course, adding from the Files app that's on your iOS device. So you have lots of ways to get started. All right, So that is number one, the interface, kind of walking around. Of course, we'll be doing more interface as we go, but let's go ahead and jump to number two, which is the various ways of opening or starting images. So I kind of talked about them, but let me show them here. So let's say that I want to start with a blank canvas. Now, this is really cool because it gives me three choices. I can start with recent sizes, and if this is your first time, you probably don't have any. But I can start with recent sizes, even a custom size. So if I don't want to use a predefined canvas size, I can just type in my dimensions, width, and height. And yes, they can be high resolution. I can also do social. So I may not be a social media expert, so I may not remember what size is an Instagram story, but it's right there. If I want to start as an Instagram story, I can, or post on a YouTube thumbnail or a TikTok clip. I can do all of those things to create my image and get the right canvas size to start with. And because you can work in high resolution, you can even start with print sizes, all the various print sizes, including a couple for video in case you're making video images or you're making images for a video. You have 1080p and 720p, but I don't see 4K, for example. So I would just create a custom size and make it the 4K dimensions. All right, I'm going to start with social. And I'm going to start with an Instagram story, and that will give me a blank Instagram story type post. So that is one of the ways of just starting with a blank canvas. Now I'm going to go home because I'm going to do it again. Next, I want to add from photos. So this time I just want to just open up one of my existing photos and work on it. So I can say add from photos. That'll take me to my photo library. I can go to my albums, which is cool because I have a lot of things in my albums already ready to go. And if I wanted to work with an image, for example, I wanted to work with this image of Pixel, I can go ahead and just open up that image of Pixel. And when I open an image for the first time, I'm going to get some let's call them presets at the bottom, or quick actions, let's call them that, at the bottom, of things I might want to do to this photo. So I might want to start off with no background. So I can say hide the background right here. I may want to start out with a solid color background and pick the color. I may want to start with the image in black and white. Or I could just say, nope, I don't know what I want to do yet. Skip all of that and go straight to the editor. So I can go straight to the editor, and then that will take me into the image that I just opened. And from there, I can do all of the Photoshop things that I want to do. So that is starting from photos. Now the next one, I'm just going to go back home because again, we're going to start with one more of these. And this is going to be starting with a stock image. So again, remember I told you a lot of this stuff I'm going to do with stock so that you can play along. Now this first set of images I'm going to work with, some of them are my own, some of them are stock. So you might have to search for a different stock image, but let's go ahead and start from stock. So I can either do it from that button that says Adobe Stock, or I can go here and say from Adobe Stock. Either one. If I say it from here, then it's going to ask me what size do I want. And I can say, make this a portrait. And there we go. So now it's asking me what image do I want to look for? And I want to look for a starry, I spelled that wrong, starry nebula. All right, there it is, nebula. And let's go ahead and hit search. And now it's searching Adobe Stock. And again, all of these images, no matter which ones you pick, are free to use. So it's really, you're getting hundreds or thousands of images to pick from that you don't have to pay for and you can use in your work here in Photoshop. All right, and there's so many good ones here. So hard for me to choose, but I just scrolling until I find one. I will find this one. I will pick that one. Now, I remember I said portrait, and it's giving me the canvas of being portrait, but this is not a portrait image. That's okay. I'll bring it in because any image you bring in, whether you bring it in from your camera roll or you take a photo or you bring it in like I'm doing from stock, it's going to add it as a layer. So even though it's bringing this image in and pulling it down in its full resolution, it is coming in as a layer. So as soon as I tap on it, I'm in free transform. And so I'm going to do two things. I'm going to scale it up to feel the whole canvas, but first I'm going to rotate it. And in order to do any of that, I'm going to scale it down first. So let's go ahead and do that. Rotate it. So I did a pinch and zoom to scale it down, and then we'll get it about 90% rotated. I wish there was a way to type that in because my finger's not very precise, so that's close enough. And then we'll just go ahead and scale it up. And now, if I zoom back out, that is filling my canvas. So that is a way to start with opening images. And now we're going to move on to number 3, which is working with layers. So I'm going to go back home one more time. And now I'm going to start a composite, working with layers and adding and adjusting and all the different things we can do. So let's go ahead and start off with, first of all, a new blank canvas. Same thing, I'm going to do that Instagram story. So that was a recent. And so now I'm set up for success because my Instagram story is the right canvas size. So everything I build here will fit perfectly on an Instagram story. So now, working with layers. You already created a layer. This is layer 1, basically, layer 0, layer 1. I can't remember, let's see. I'll swipe out. This is layer 1. And so you can, and this is your layer icon. It's 2 modes. You can tap, and then you can swipe out to get more access to the layers and controls. And yes, you can even name them. I'm typing on my regular keyboard. We'll call this white canvas. All right, there we go. And so just like you would in Photoshop, you have layers. And for those of you who never worked in Photoshop and say, what's a layer? Layers are like clear pieces of acetate that you have, that you can stack things up on top of without disturbing the things underneath. So even though I'm not going to use that white canvas, that set up the size of the document that I needed. Now I want to add a new layer. So working with layers is typically adding 2 or more. So that's why we, work with layers. So I'm going to go ahead and add the second one. And when I hit the plus sign, now remember we had a blue plus sign when we started. That was to get started with whatever kind of document you wanted to open. It's just all layers. So whether or not I want to create an empty layer, a fill layer, a type layer, an adjustment layer, and an image layer. An image layer is what I want because I want to bring in another image. So I'm going to bring in an image layer. And again, I can get that image from stock, just like we showed. I want to get another nebula image, or I can grab one that I already got from before on my photos album or my camera roll. So I'm going to add this one from photos. We're going to go to collections. I'm going to go to retro astronaut, and there's the nebula I want to bring in. So whether I did it from stock, whether I did it from image I already had, I could bring it in either way. Now that comes in as a separate layer. I can tap, I can scale it up like we did before. And once I say okay, and once I tap down on that, we swipe out, and we can see that that is now the second layer stacked up on top. Now layers can be changed in order, so I can press and hold and move that layer down, and now it's below the white canvas, so we don't see it anymore. Or I can tap and move it down, and now we see it because it's on top. So just like in Photoshop on desktop, you have the ability to work with multiple layers. We're not going to stop there. We're going to add another layer. So let's add another image layer. Same thing. Any of the sources are always available. So I'm going to add another one from photos. I'm going to go back to that same collection, and I'm going to add this one from the same one. I'm going to get this stock image of a prop plane. And oops, and it probably added it because I was on the layer below. I'm going to add it, move it up. All right, so that was a case where I had a layer selected. I had the whatever layer was below, but selected. And when whatever layer you have selected, it always adds to the next layer above it. So I basically sandwiched it in between the white canvas and the nebula because I had the white canvas probably selected. All right, so now I'm going to take this plane, I'm going to move it down. So you can pick up a layer, you can move it around. If you tap on it, you get all the handles to scale it, and the handle at the very top, the tall one, is to rotate. So I got the image in place that I want, and now we're going to jump in and we're going to talk about, because I have to do it in this image, we're going to talk about making a selection and removing a background. Now, making selections is number 4. It's the next step. So we're kind of going in order anyway, but let's go ahead and make selections on this image. So number 4, making selections. So select area is where you start all selections. So that button at the bottom, select area. Now, before I leave layers, before we get to number 4, which is making selection, I just want to point out layer properties is there. So if you were looking for things like blend and opacity, there's your blend modes. So your blend modes are all here from Photoshop that you know, as well as opacity. to bring the opacity of a layer down and make it less opaque. So I just want to point out those things before I forget and before we leave this section. But let's head over now and make selections. So as I started saying, number 4, making selections. Selections all start with the select area button. So when I hit select area, that gives me multiple ways to select, and it gives me something brand new to Photoshop. It will look at your photo and kind of do what object selection does, where it looks for things to select automatically and give them to you. And this whole mode is called tap select. So tap select, as the name implies, allows you to tap and make selections. And I admit that I didn't realize that tap selection meant that you can also tap right on the canvas. I just learned that not too long ago. So I was always tapping the buttons down here at the bottom below the image, but you can actually tap right on the image, and that will make a selection when you do that. So I tapped right on the image, and it selected most of the plane. It got all of the middle of the plane and the propeller, but it did not get the wings. So I want to add to that selection. Now, I could keep trying to tap, but the other way to do this is I can add a selection using a different tool. So for example, I could use the object selection tool. And with the object selection tool, I can say, hey, no, I need these wings too. And then when I do that, it will add them to the selection. Now, one of the things that's also new to Photoshop on phone, it's different than the other surfaces, is that the Photoshop team wanted you to know what was selected and what wasn't. And as soon as I hit the check mark, I'll get the standard marching ants that we're used to, the animation around the selection. But in the meantime, to know what I've selected, notice that the space above it and the sky above the plane are all checkerboard pattern. Anytime you see that checkerboard pattern, traditionally in Photoshop, that means transparency, but here it means that area is not selected. So basically, as soon as I tapped the plane, it became 100% opacity. As soon as I selected the wings, they became 100% opacity. Everything else that's not selected, like the sky, which I don't want, is the checkerboard pattern. So just remember that that's what that means. So you have a plus and a minus to add or subtract from a selection. You have the one with the line through it means deselect. So if I deselect that, now everything's back to the checkerboard pattern. And if I go back to tap select, I can also say select subject. And that does a good job of selecting the whole plane. And again, the sky is not selected. You have the ability to inverse the selection. So now everything but the plane is selected, and the plane is the checkerboard pattern. So you can inverse, and you can also, but anyway, and if you ever are in doubt, you can always tap the little thing here. There we go. That the eyedropper is sample all layers. So if you had multiple layers and you wanted it to select down multiple layers, just like in Photoshop on desktop, that's what that eyedropper means. So if you're ever in doubt, you can always use the little 3-dot menu to get the descriptions of what those things are. So that's great. So now I want that eyedropper off because I do want the whole plane and not the layers below. And now I'll go ahead and say, and by the way, you have magic wand, ellipse, rectangular selection, object selection, which we used, lasso, quick selection brush, and tap select. So you have a lot of the same selection tools from Photoshop Desktop. So now, as soon as I hit the check mark to say I'm done making selections, now I get the standard marching ant pattern around the selected object. So I know that's what I got selected. The sky is not selected. So I'm going to go ahead and say, hide everything else by hitting the apply as mask. And then it just simply hides the background. So if I go to my layers, I can now see that there's the plane and that black and white icon right next to it, which is my layer mask. And for those of you who are new to Photoshop, mask means hide. So it's just like if you put on a mask, you're hiding your face. So the areas, it's non-destructive editing. So all the areas that are masked out are still there. I can always go back and delete that mask, turn that mask off, and get right back to the sky that was there. Okay, great. So now I've got the nebula layer, which is the space. I've got the, and by the way, if I wanted to rename this nebula, because that's what I keep calling it, you can double tap and rename a layer. So now that's called nebula because that's the way I'm referring to it. And you can also say, hey, I don't need this layer anymore. And you can go ahead and delete a layer. So I can delete a layer if I don't need it because that's taking up extra space in the file for no reason. All right, so now that I've got this, I need one more element for this. And by the way, I can still see a little bit of a white edge around that propeller. So this is a great opportunity to talk about this feature. Let's go ahead and go back to the plane. You notice I have edit mask and modify mask. It kind of sounds like the same thing. Edit and modify, aren't those the same words, same things? No, they're a little bit different. So edit the mask means I want to add or subtract from the mask. Modify the mask means I want to take the exact mask that's there and make changes to it. So when I say modify mask, I can also say expand and contract. So I want to contract that by like 2 pixels and apply it. So that means tighten it up so that I don't see so much white space around those propellers. And look, it did. It removed some of the white space. I can still go back to the layer properties, modify mask, expand and contract. I can pull it in some more. 2 more or 3 more pixels. Let's do that. And boom, it got rid of that white edge, that white halo around my selection. So, because remember, when you're doing select subject or you're doing these automated selections, it may not grab everything perfectly. So it's great that you can go ahead and modify that mask. All right, so now that we got that in place, now we're gonna do one more thing. We're gonna add in our hero shot, our astronaut. So we'll go ahead and hit plus sign. We'll add in another image layer. We'll add this one from photos. And again, go to the collection, same collection we're in. Here's an astronaut. This is one I shot in my studio. So this is not going to be on stock. I don't know, it might not be on free stock, but it is on stock. But I can go ahead and move this layer around, which is great. I'm going to put her right on top of the plane. We're going to do a couple things. First of all, we need to get rid of that background. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's go ahead and drop that in. Let's go ahead and select area. This is an easy one. And remember I said the tap select, so see what it did? It found the mask and it found her. So it's giving me the mask as a separate selection. So if I wanted just the mask, boom, it selected just the mask. And again, I can deselect because I do want more than the mask. So this is an easy one. I'm just gonna say select subject and that selects her, great. So now I'll go ahead and say I'm done and I'll go ahead and say that I want to apply as a mask and that removes the background. Now, there's still a little bit of white between her fingers on her right hand, which is on the left side. So again, I could do that same trick where we go into the layer properties, we go into modify mask, and we go into expand and contract, and we just pull it down a little bit. Okay, great. Say okay on that. And that'll reduce some of it. You could also go in and you could go in and physically make some changes to the mask itself by zooming all the way in and selecting that little white area and making that go away as part of the mask as well by adding to it. But for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that. If I really wanted to get nitpicky, I would. Anyway, next thing I want to do is I want to change the layer order. Because right now she's in a weird space. She's really not on the plane. She's sitting kind of on the propeller. And so if that propeller turned, she'd fall off. I want her behind the propellers. So again, if I made her a little bigger, see what I mean? She's in front of everything. So let's go ahead and just simply go to our layers, swipe out, and just simply move her down. And I'm not going to make the same mistake I made last time by leaving that layer selected. I'm going to go ahead and back and select the top layer, which is now the plane. And now you notice her legs are behind the propellers. Okay. Now, to tie this all together, the thing that I don't like about this is that the sky is nice, pretty blue, and she's in color, but she's got kind of a black and white suit on. And the plane is just aluminum, so it looks black and white. And I just think this would all fit better if it were a black and white. So now we're going to talk about an adjustment layer, because that's a different type of layer. So adjustment layers work usually from the top down. So that's why I said I wanted to make sure I have that top layer selected, because when I add it, it adds it above it. And so let's go ahead and do that. And let's add an adjustment layer. And I'm going to add, and by the way, there's only 4: hue, saturation, and brightness, contrast, black and white, and color balance. Nope, there are more. You just got to scroll up. So I'm going to hit black and white, and you're saying, well, Terry, nothing happened. And there's a reason why you're saying nothing happened. Because this, for traditional Photoshop users, this is a departure from the way Photoshop normally works. The way Photoshop normally works is, like I said, an adjustment layer is from the top down. But there is a way in regular Photoshop desktop to do what's called a clipped adjustment, where it only applies to the layer right above it, right below it. So it would only be applying to the plane, which again, you can't tell because it already looks black and white. That's exactly what it did. So when you add an adjustment layer in Photoshop on phone, it is clipped by default. And that's a little bit different very different. It's the opposite of what it does on Photoshop desktop. So all I have to do, swipe out and go to the layer properties for that black and white adjustment layer. And you can even see the little arrow pointing down on the left side of it. That lets me know visually that it's a clipped adjustment. So I'm just going to say unclipped layer from the menu. So now that little arrow goes away, and guess what? Everything turned black and white. So I'm on the black and white adjustment layer. If I go to the layer properties, I can go back to that black and white. Now I can tune my black and white with the sliders, because adjusting the sliders before really wasn't going to do much because it was only going to affect the plane. So I can go ahead and say that I want her a little bit brighter. So I'm using the reds and yellows that are in her face. Great. To make her a little bit brighter. And I want that blue tone way back. So I'll grab the blues, because remember that sky is mostly blue. We'll pull that way back to get more of that dramatic black and white effect. So that was number 4. And number 3, kind of combined. Working with layers, adjustment layers. We're going to do some more blending on opacity, and also making selections and masking and just making your selections using multiple tools, adding and subtracting from a selection if you need to, and then using the new tap select. So now we're going to move on to number 5, which is retouching. So we're going to get out of this photo and we're going to go to our stock acne boy. So this photo is from Adobe stock. I got this one a long time ago to show some of the remove tool capabilities. So you have to find your own portrait to retouch in this case. Maybe it's one of yourself, maybe it's a selfie, maybe it's someone else. But anyway, this is mainly to show some of the tools. So where this photo come from? Why was it already there? Because I saved this photo to the cloud from Photoshop on desktop. So when you're on Photoshop on desktop, you do a save as, you can choose save to cloud. And once you do that and give it a name, it'll be saved up to Adobe Cloud or Creative Cloud, and therefore accessible on your other Photoshop surfaces. So let's pinch and zoom. And we wouldn't want to send him to picture day on a bad acne day. So you notice at the very bottom, there's a dedicated button for retouch, and that's where you'll find the traditional retouching tools. You'll find a spot healing brush, and you'll find a remove tool, and you'll find the clone stamp, lighten and darken. So kind of like dodge and burn. All right, so the traditional get rid of distractions or get rid of blemishes are all in that same category. Now, whether you use the spot healing or the remove will really depend on the kind of thing you're trying to remove. If it's simple, spot heal will do a great job. If it's more complex, you probably want to use the remove tool. So, because remove tool just has newer technology. So I'll use a little bit of both. Now you notice that no matter which tool I pick, there's a little properties icon to the right of it. That's where you can get in and tap that and get to the brush size. So if I tap on the size, I can see the size of my brush while I'm kind of looking at the thing I need to remove to kind of make it just a little bit bigger than the thing I need to remove. And that's great. So now when I use that brush, I can get rid of these blemishes with either a tap or a brush stroke, and away they go. So we get them on. We can even do a little work on the hairs here. And see, it kind of starts to smudge in. So thankfully, we can undo that. And we maybe try the remove tool on those areas. Same thing, I want to see what size my brush is first. Make it maybe make it look a little smaller. And then we'll do that. And it will remove it. And it kind of leaves this little pink highlight behind. That's not permanent. See, as I go do the next one, it kind of goes away. But I guess it's just reminding you where you just did it so you can see it. All right. So again, same thing there, same thing here. So this is for bigger areas, more complex, complicated areas, just much easier to do it with, or much better results with the remove tool than with the spot healing brush. So depending on what you need to remove, you got both options, and you even have the clone stamp tool if you need to clone an area from one part of the photo to another part of the photo. So for example, here, let's go ahead and get rid of that line. He's too young to have those kind of lines. Let's go ahead and say, again, I'm just having fun here cleaning up because it's like a game. Once you start, you can't stop. All right, so let's say that I wanted to, for whatever reason, clone some of the hair. And maybe you're especially on makeup, maybe you're esthetician, you're fixing kind of a brow, and you want to use the clone stamp tool. And so first there's a target. So you notice a little target, like we have some different icons. A little target says, where do you want to clone from? So I tap, that sets the target. Now I can go into the properties and I can say the hardness, the opacity, the roundness, and the angle. So you kind of have like all those sophisticated Photoshop methods here. But as I start cloning, you notice it's brushing that hair from the target onto this side. So you have the same cool clone stamp capabilities right here on your phone. It just amazes me that the Photoshop team was able to get this all in working in the palm of my hand. All right, so again, you have multiple undos, just keep that in mind. You can always undo, 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 undo. I'm putting back all of those blemishes, undo, 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 undo. You can really undo multiple undos all the way back to the beginning. So when it grayed out, that was all the way back to the very beginning of this file. So just remember, if you mess up at the very top, undo, redo. So I can redo them all away. I can undo them all back. So it's very cool to do that. All right, so that is number 5, retouching, removing. And just to point out, just because I called them out, but I didn't really talk about them, if I thought there was like a shiny spot. So let's go here to his nose. And let's do, first of all, let's get rid of the blemishes there. It's got a big one right there, and a big one right there, and a big one right here. Actually, let me undo, undo, undo. I don't want to get rid of that much of it. Hang on, let's make the brush smaller. Smaller brush. There we go. And so now we'll just get rid of that. Okay, I left that little highlight there for a reason. So now if I go to darken, for example, and if I go to the properties for darken, I can do the midtones, I can do the exposure, I can do the size. And so basically I can just go ahead and start darkening an area of the photo. Now I would typically do this on a separate layer. So I create a layer first, or I would really lower the opacity of that layer so therefore it's not as harsh as this. So just keep in mind that the dodge and burn work best when you're doing it onto a different layer. I just want to point out that they are there. So you can also lessen, instead of it doing so much at one time, you can also drop the exposure way down. So I can say, hey, don't do so much at once. Let me brush it in a little bit. And there we go. So that way it's doing it over time as opposed to being super harsh off the top. So that's one way to kind of remove a hot spot. But you also just, keep in mind, you can also just literally remove it now. So you have the ability to go in and just simply remove that area. And that removes the hot spot much better than we used to with dodge and burn. But for people that like dodge and burn, it's there, and you can dodge and burn onto a different layer. Okay, so that is the retouching capabilities, number 5. Number 6, we kind of already talked about this, but this was removing the background. So let me go in, and let's get out of this photo. Let's undo it all back. There we go, because I just want to save that one for the next time I need it. Let's get out of this photo. And now let's go ahead and create another photo, and this time we're going to remove the background. So we're going to create we're going to add one from stock. So let's add one from stock, and we'll just do a landscape type image. And I'm going to search for the word so you can get the same image, elephant. Okay, so there's my elephant, and I want to grab this one. Yes. All right, there's my elephant. Came in, filled the canvas. Great. Now, I also want to put some grass behind the elephant. So let's add a new layer. And let's also get that one from Adobe Stock. We'll go Adobe Stock, and we'll do, I kind of like a yellow, oops, I didn't spell yellow right. There we go. Yellow grassy field. All right, we'll search for that. Oh, nothing found. How about yellow grass? Might have been too specific for the free collection. There we go. So now we're getting some yellow grass here, because that's typically where you would see a elephant. You wouldn't see them on a nice green park. You would see them on some yellow grass. All right, we'll grab this one. That's great. Yep, bring that one in. Okay, so same thing, because I did it in the reverse order. The grass came in, but it's on top of the elephant. But let's take care of the grass first. Let's zoom out. Let's go ahead and make it fill this whole canvas. Great. And so now let's zoom back in, and now we need to reverse the order of the layers. So we swipe out, we pull this layer down, so now the elephant's on top. And clearly the the background needs to be removed. So we could go in and if I had added the image from my camera roll, remember I get that choice of, hey, do you want to hide the background right away? Well, because of the way I brought it in from stock, we don't get that choice. So I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, I want the elephant layer. And now we're going to do the same thing you kind of already seen me do. I'm going to make a selection, select area. And I could simply tap select right on the elephant. And again, because this is non-destructive, we're not trying to delete the background. We're just trying to mask or hide it. So we say apply mask, and that will do exactly that. Now, that's removing the background. You kind of saw me do this multiple times already. It's just simply making a selection of the thing you want to keep and applying the mask to hide the thing you don't want, which is usually the background. Now that's going to take us into number 7, because it's going to kind of work hand in hand. And that's why I built this example. The elephant doesn't look natural because it's standing on top of the blades of grass. If we zoom in on his feet wouldn't look like that. You wouldn't be able to see his toes because his toes would be in the grass. So this is where masking comes in, which is number 7. So for number 7, what I want to do is I want to mask his feet so that we don't see them and we just see the grass. Now, remember, there's already a mask there. So if we go into layer properties, we're going to see edit mask and modify mask. Now, we already did modify mask. That was making the mask tighter. Now we're going to do edit mask, which is add or subtract to the existing mask. So we're going to say edit mask. And what I want to do here is I want to subtract from it, because I want to remove remove the part of his mask, or remove the part of the mask that's showing his feet. So this is going to be a subtract. So add was the default, subtract is what I want, and I want to use the lasso to do it, because I just want to make an irregular selection. And I want to choose the feather, because right now the feather would normally default to 0, which means it would make it a very hard edge selection. I'm going to bump it up to about 15 or so, a little bit higher. And therefore now when I tap to make the selection around his feet like this, and I let go, and see how they kind of hid? They came back to be checkerboard pattern because they're no longer being visible. So now when I do that, his feet are standing in the grass. And the reason I did the feather is so that it's a soft edge against the grass, against his legs, as opposed to a hard edge that looks like it was cut out with a pair of scissors. That's what feathering does, is it softens the selection. All right, so that is just one of the other ways of masking. So we already did some masking with removing the background. We already modified a mask. Now we edited a mask. So you can apply this technique to multiple things that you want to do, depending on how you want to hide parts of an image. That's what masking is all about. Okay, so that takes us to number 8, using generative AI. And for this, we're going to do another scene, a different scene that we're going to put together. So for this scene, I'm going to go back home, and I'm going to start with an image that's on my camera roll. So let's go ahead and start with that. So let's open up or add from photos, collection here. And we're going to build this space, well, not space, but this kind of fantasy scene here of a whale watching in space. So we've got this part of the image ready to go. And again, I don't want to knock out the background or anything of those things. Just go straight to the editor. Great. So that gave me the canvas here that I wanted. So there's 2 types of generative AI inside of Photoshop on the phone. There's generative expand, which allows me to expand the canvas and make part of the image taller or wider. And then there's generative fill, which allows me to fill in parts of an image. So I'm going to go to size here, and I'm just going to go ahead and crop up. Now, this wasn't a tall image, but I want to make it a tall image. And I can even choose a size, like Instagram. Make it an Instagram story. So I can even choose that as my size, and it will give me that size. So that's great. But I don't want to fill it with blank space or black. I want to fill it with space. So let's just go ahead and tap. There's a generative fill icon, the red one right there. I'm just going to tap fill this with or generate part of this image. And I'm going to do again, starry nebula. Now, this is not searching for stock. This is actually going to generate one. So we'll hit generate. And look at that. It's beautiful. So it gave me my entire scene. It gave me my scene. And by the way, it gave me 3 choices to choose from. So when you start off with generative expand or generative fill, it will give you 3 choices by default. And if you don't like any of those, you can hit more to generate 3 more. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and pick one. I kind of like them all. I'll pick this one. All right, so now we got and it comes in as a layer, by the way. So that is a generative layer, a starry nebula. You can always go back to it, get to the variations. So here are the variations, remember, that we started with. Always get back to it and get to the prompt and do more. Okay, so now that we got that in place, the next thing I want to bring in is another element. So I'm going to bring in another image from my photos, from the collection. I'm going to bring in this picture of a whale. Now, we're bringing this picture of a whale. I'm going to go ahead and do a couple things. First of all, I want to scale it down a little bit. And I also want to rotate it. So I use that big handle at the top to rotate it and get any orientation I want. You can also, just as a side note, you can flip it. You can flip it upside down, flip it left and right, and scale it while you've got it. You can even distort it and skew it just like you would in Photoshop on desktop while you've got it here in Free Transform. All right, so now that we got that there, the next thing we're going to do is, you guessed it, remove the background. So let's go ahead and select. We'll do a tap select. It should automatically figure it out. If not, we'll just simply say select the subject, but it did automatically figure it out. So we'll select the whale. The whale is selected now, and we'll just simply say apply mask to get rid of that background. So now the next thing we want to do is add in a blend mode. I want to tie all of these together to kind of look the same. So we're going to add, we're going to add an adjustment layer, not a blend mode. We're going to add an adjustment layer to this. And I want to add an adjustment layer, and I want to add an adjustment layer that is kind of like a color balance here. Let's do that. And we'll add it more cyan, and we'll add it more blue, kind of getting the whale to match there. And right now, remember, it's clipped. It's only applying it to the whale, which that's fine because the whale is what really need to be blended in. But if I needed to, I could go in here to the layer prop. Oh, we want to do it the other way. When we get to that color balance, which is clipped by default, we can unclip it so it applies that same blue to the whole rest of the image. So now the skies kind of match better, the whale matches better, and that is one of the ways of using generative AI. Now we're going to do one more way. We're going to add in something that didn't exist. So first we're going to make a selection of where I want to put it. And I'm going to use the ellipse. I'm just going to say that I want it right here. And so now once I get it right there, I want to make that selection And I want to use now, anytime you make a selection, you get that red generate button. So because I made a selection, I get generative fill. So this is the same thing I'm going to do. We're going to do moon, and we'll just say moon, and we'll just let it go, see what happens. All right, we get different moons. Ooh, I like that one. That one's kind of cool too. That was kind of cool. I like that one too. So I could go with either one of these last two. Wow, I kind of like them both. So let's say I went with this one. We'll go ahead and say yes on that. And I just want to go to the layer properties and just remind you that you could go in, go to blend and opacity, and kind of lower the opacity, kind of make it fade back into the background. Very powerful stuff. For those of you who are traditional Photoshop users, you recognize every single thing I'm doing, and you're like, wow, he's doing that all on his phone. And for people that are new to Photoshop, you're saying there's no app on the App Store that will let me do all of this way. And you're right. So let's go ahead and add another layer. This time we're going to add a different kind of layer that we didn't have before. We're going to add a type layer. That's right. You can also just work with text. Whale watching, making sure I spell it all right, in space. SP, I can't see it. I think that's space, but don't worry, we're going to be able to see it in just a second here. So that gives me this layer I can move around. Yes, I did type it right. I'm gonna move it up here. And once I double tap on it again, I get back to the text option. So I can edit the text, use the blend and opacity. I can create a mask. I can transform it, but I want to go into the text options because it's going to give me, first of all, 20,000 fonts to choose from. That's right. The entire Adobe font library is here, ready for you to use. What I love about it is I don't have to know the name of a font. I just look to see which one I like, which one looks good. And I'm going to do this one. So we'll use that font. Now that doesn't show it to me because I can't see the color. The color is off. So for that, I'm going to use the color. And I could go in and just start picking colors. Here, I need to make that a capital W. I can pick any color in the spectrum. But what's more fun is actually using the eyedropper and sampling a color that's right in your image. So that way you get it's a color that's going to work because it's a color that is already in the scene. All right, so with that said, we got our font. I'm going to go edit the text one more time, get here, get rid of that, make it a capital W. There we go. And we're good to go. I can scale that, make it bigger, make it smaller. I can move it around because it is a separate layer. I can treat that any way that I want. And there's my whale watching in space. But there's one more thing I want to generate since we're talking about generative AI. So let's create a new layer. And yep, so that's just showing you the layers here. So now we're going to get out of this. We're going to create a new empty layer. And actually, you know what? I don't even need to do that. Let's undo. We don't need to do a new empty layer. What I want to do instead, let's get below, just trying to think of where I want this. I'm going to go below the type. There we go. And I'm going to make a selection below the type. So I'm going to go to select area, and I'm not going to use any of that other stuff. I'm just going to use the rectangular marquee tool. Make a selection around the whole thing. And now I got a selection around the whole thing. I'm going to make that selection, and I'm going to use generative fill. I'm going to do snowfalling at night. Go. Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. I've got that one. I've got that one. But that first one, because this one was adding a city, I like this one because it's just the snow. You're saying, well, Terry, that's great. You put it below the type, but you put it above everything else, and now we can't see anything. Until we go into the layer properties for that generative fill, we go into blend modes. This is what I was talking about earlier when I said adjustment layers. We can go through each one of these and see them. And I know the one I want is screen, and there it is. So screen, and we make the opacity a little lower, and we can kind of blend that snow right in. So now we've got snowy, starry, starry nebula, and we could even go in and mask part of that so we don't see the snow at the top if we didn't want to. But you get the idea. So that was using generative AI, which was number 8. I can keep iterating on this and keep playing with it, but there's my layered file all ready to go. Everything's non-destructive, and I can go back and tweak to my heart's content. And of course, just getting out of it saves it to Creative Cloud. Now we're gonna do the last 2 things, which is number 9 for my Lightroom users, round tripping from Lightroom. So let's go there. All right, so round tripping from Lightroom. I've launched Lightroom, so I'm using Lightroom on my phone right now, and I'm in Lightroom, and Photoshop's not in the foreground. And I'm scrolling through an album of all my favorite iPhone photos so that we're basically just staying with iPhone the entire way. Now, of course, you can use any photo you want, but I'm going to choose this one. So this is a photo that I took in studio with my iPhone 16 Pro. Might have been my 15 Pro, but anyway, my iPhone, and I would love to change the background. So for this, I can't change the background in Lightroom. I can't replace it, I should say. I can make it a different color, I can make it lighter or darker, I can do some great things to it, but I can't replace it. That's what Photoshop's for. So I'm gonna hit the share icon at the top, and you'll notice there's a button now that says Edit in Photoshop, just like on desktop. So when I say Edit in Photoshop, that makes a copy of this file. Notice it's generating a PSD, image 4442.psd, a Photoshop document. And so now it's opening that Photoshop document here in Photoshop, and you notice there's a big button back to Lightroom at the top when we're finished. So we're gonna do the same kind of thing here. We're gonna do select area, and this time we're gonna do something I hadn't done yet. We're gonna tap select, and this time we're just gonna go ahead and select the background. It knows what the background is, and it selected it, leaving her unselected. Now, this time we're not hiding it, we're not masking it, we're actually gonna use that area and generate something new. So we're gonna use generative fill, I'm gonna just type in modern home family room. Let's just put her in a family room setting in a modern home and go. Generate that. I like it. That's a nice one. Not so much crazy about that one. And that one's, I don't like the black lamp. So that'd be my favorite, and I can always hit more to generate more. That one's cool. That one's not so cool. That one's okay, but that's my favorite. Now, I can still do all the other Photoshop things. I can add more images. I can add text. I can make changes. I can do all the stuff we've already seen. But once I'm done doing all of those things, I'm just not going to go through them over and over again. But now that I've done, let's say this was it, back to Lightroom. So it's saving this first of all, so it's in my Photoshop cloud. Secondly, it brings it back to Lightroom. And if we wait a second, it'll stack it right next to the original. So here's the original, and here's the one we just did. So back in Lightroom, being synced with Lightroom to the cloud. So this will be in my Lightroom desktop as a layered Photoshop file. So if I want to work on it in Photoshop desktop when I get home, I can. But for right now, I'm able to work with this and use it. And that takes us to number 10, saving your document and exporting your finished photo. So let's go back to Photoshop, and let's go ahead and, I may have been mistaken where it did not save that one in the cloud. Anyway, but let's go back to it. And let's say that we want to go back to this one. And now we want to share this. Well, in order to share it, I need to get it out of Photoshop. And I need to get it out of Photoshop in a format that others can open, because not everyone's going to have Photoshop. So when I hit the share icon, first of all, I can just do a quick export as a PNG file. When I do a quick export as a PNG, it's, as the name implies, it makes a PNG in whatever resolution it is and saves it out to your camera roll. So therefore, when you go to save it, share it on Instagram or Facebook or whatever platform you're on, you will have the ability to do that. So that's one right off the bat, and I can share that directly from here. You see it's a 50 megabyte file. Now I also have the ability to export. So if I go to export, I can choose the format. So if I want a JPEG, I can choose the quality, and I can choose the format. So just all the standard JPEG stuff. So I can export out as a PNG, a JPEG, a PSD, or a TIFF. And the PSD and TIFF support the layers. So you have the option to export this out any size, or I should say any format you want, and share it any way you want. So that is a quick look, extended look, of Photoshop on iPhone. Coming to Android, but on iPhone today. Go download it, go check it out. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and also check out the rest of my videos on my channel. Cheers, everyone. Thanks for watching. We will be doing more of this as time goes on. We'll catch you on the next one.